Hi, I have another story for you from the Biscuit, Buttons, and Pickles series, and this story is called Goose Eggs by E.J. Taylor. Ruby Buttons yawned and rubbed her eyes. She could hear the crackling of fire and the wood stove downstairs. Miss Biscuit had been awake for some time, and the smells of breakfast were floating up to the bedroom. Violet was still sleeping, so Ruby dressed quietly and tiptoed down to the kitchen. "Good morning, Ruby. Did you sleep well?" "Oh, yes, thank you." "Good. Then have some breakfast, and you can help me look for a goat. Would you like marmalade or strawberry jam?" Ruby looked puzzled. "Strawberry jam, please. You mean there is a goat hiding here in the kitchen?" Miss Biscuit laughed. "Oh, no. Let me explain. I'm looking for a goat to buy." And she read aloud from the newspaper. "Livestock auction Saturday at Duff's farm. We're in luck, Ruby. That's today. Finish your breakfast and I'll wake Violet." Suddenly they heard loud screams coming from the bedroom. It was Violet, and she sounded hysterical. Miss Biscuit dropped the newspaper and ran upstairs to the bedroom. Ruby hurried behind her. Violet was standing in the middle of her bed, screaming her head off. "Violet, what on earth is the matter?" "There's a mouse in my bed." "Oh dear," said Ruby. "I think she means Oliver." Ruby pulled back the blankets and picked up a small gray mouse, who seemed to be more frightened than Violet. "This is Oliver. I found him in the garden. He's got a sore throat, so I'm keeping him inside until he feels better." Ruby put the tiny mouse into the pocket of her dress. "I'm very sorry he frightened you, Violet." "Well, I should hope so. Mice are dirty, you know, and they don't belong inside the house." "There's nothing to be frightened of," said Miss Biscuit. "I'm sure Oliver is a very clean little mouse. Now hurry and get dressed, Violet. We're going to buy a goat today." They followed the footpath along the river to Farmer Duff's. A large crowd had already gathered in the barnyard. There were farm animals of every kind: horses and pigs, cows and sheep, and several different goats, but Ruby said they lacked personality. They were just about to give up when Miss Biscuit spotted Matilda. Ruby gasped. She must be the most beautiful brown and white goat in the world. And Miss Biscuit had to agree. Even Violet thought Matilda was special. They found seats inside the barn and waited for Matilda, who was number 25, to come into the ring. She finally appeared, and when the bidding was over, Miss Biscuit had gone far over her budget for a goat. She believed, however, that the extravagance was sometimes a good thing if you really had your heart set on something. They found Matilda tied to a fence next to her previous owner, Mrs. Willoughby. But when they tried to take Matilda away, she wouldn't move. They tried everything they could to coax her, but she was determined and refused to take a single step in any direction. "I was afraid this would happen," said Mrs. Willoughby. "It's Hannah, you see. Hannah is her best friend. Bless her little heart. She won't go anywhere without Hannah." "Oh dear," said Miss Biscuit. "What should we do? I don't think we need 2 goats. Why, don't you have a look at her? Wait right here, and I'll go get her." Miss Willoughby returned seconds later. "This is Hannah," she said. "A goose?" cried Violet. "That's right," said Mrs. Willoughby. "Oh, and there is just one other thing." "What's that?" said Violet. "Well, it's James. James and Hannah Honk. They're a pair. I wouldn't separate them for the world." "Oh, I see," said Miss Biscuit. "We'd better have a look, then." Hannah was beautiful, but James was irresistible, so Miss Biscuit and Mrs. Willoughby settled the accounts for the 2 geese and said goodbye with a handshake. Ruby led Matilda on a rope, and James and Hannah followed Miss Biscuit along the footpath by the river back to Ivy Cottage. Violet was a little frightened of the geese and kept a safe distance behind them. They had just passed Fern Hill when Miss Biscuit suggested they stop and rest under a large willow tree. The sun was very hot, and the cool shade was a welcome relief. Matilda found some log grass, and James and Hannah jumped in the water for a swim. Miss Biscuit took off her cardigan and leaned against the tree. Violet was brushing the dust off her shoes when she spotted a large green frog sitting in the tall grass next to Ruby. "Ruby," she whispered, "don't move. Don't even breathe. There is a large green—" The frog leaped forward. Violet screamed and ran behind a tree. "Poor thing," said Ruby. "He's jumping in circles." And she knelt down and picked up the frog. "Ruby," cried Violet, "how can you touch such a horrible frog? He needs help. He's hurt. He's hurt his leg, so he can't jump straight. I'm taking him home." Miss Biscuit agreed, overruling Violet's objections. When they got home, Ruby made a splint for the frog's leg. She named him Zachary, and he slept in a hat under her bed. Ruby and Matilda became good friends, and soon there was a fresh supply of milk each morning for breakfast. In the afternoons they all worked in the garden. Miss Biscuit took care of the weeding, Ruby did the watering, and Violet was in charge of the strawberry patch. She believed that if the strawberries did not look good, they would not taste good. She spent hours polishing each leaf with warm water and a soft cloth, until they were all bright and shiny. On very hot days they would pack a lunch and go for a picnic along the river near Fern Hill. Ruby had several new pets to look after, and seemed to find some tiny creature in need of help wherever she went. Miss Biscuit was busy making jars and jars of preserves from the garden, and Violet was reading the complete works of Shakespeare. The summer days passed quietly, with their routine changing very little, until one very hot day at the end of July. Miss Biscuit and Violet were preparing dinner when Ruby pushed open the kitchen door. "You must come at once," she said in an excited voice. "What is it?" asked Miss Biscuit. "It's a surprise," said Ruby. "I can't tell you." Ruby turned and raced out of the kitchen. Miss Biscuit and Violet followed her, running all the way down to the river. "Oh, for heaven's sake," said Miss Biscuit, "she's built a nest." "Yes," said Ruby, "and guess what else? She has 5 eggs. I want to move her up to the bedroom where she'll be safe." Violet did not wait for Ruby to finish. "Absolutely not." "But Violet," said Ruby, "there are wild animals all along the river at night. It's dangerous." "There are wild animals all over the bedroom," replied Violet. "Baby squirrels in the stocking drawer, a turtle and a frog under the bed, a robin in the sewing basket, and yesterday I found a mole sleeping in my shoebox. If that goose comes into the house, I'm leaving." Violet stomped her foot and marched back to the cottage. "Oh dear," said Ruby. "Now what will I do?" Miss Biscuit took Ruby's hand. "There isn't a problem in the world that can't be solved. You'll think of something. Now let's eat some dinner."